It is not desirable to cultivate a respect for the law so much as for the right. The only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do at any time what I think right. Law never made men a whit more just, and by means of their respect for it, even the well-disposed are daily made the agents of injustice. Cast your whole vote, not a strip of paper merely, but your whole influence.
Henry David Thoreau believed that it was immoral to comply with an unjust government. He believed that if a law was unjust, it was proper and right to disobey it. Thoreau's philosophy, civil disobedience, has influenced countless figures in later generations. For one, he influenced Gandhi, who led a successful revolution in India without ever resorting to violent tactics. His ideas reverberate in the actions of people like Rosa Parks. Today, I'm at the Rosa Parks Museum in downtown Montgomery, sitting beside a statue of Rosa Parks as she refused to give up her seat on the bus. This action was a small act of disobedience that made a huge difference on our nation's history. And it all started here in Montgomery, Alabama. Montgomery is often called the cradle of the civil rights movement, and in many ways this is true. The Montgomery bus boycott was the first large-scale protest in the civil rights movement, and it all started with Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on the bus. It was a simple act of civil disobedience. She hadn't technically broken any written laws, but she had broken some pretty powerful social ones. And in Montgomery, Alabama, in 1955, that was enough to justify her arrest. She wasn't the first person to refuse to give up her seat on a bus, and she wasn't the first one to be arrested for it. But ultimately, she would be the one the movement would get behind. People really did stop taking the bus to work on a massive scale, and it was successful. It made a difference. This movement was important not only because it was the first, but because Martin Luther King took on one of his first leadership roles in association with the Montgomery bus boycott. I'll talk about Martin Luther King more in a moment, but first I'd like to pose a few reflective questions.
How can we relate this simple act to the ideas we read about in Thoreau's resistance to civil government? When is it morally necessary to disobey authority? Is breaking the law ever justified? Is it ever morally necessary? In what ways can social laws be more powerful than written laws?
At the time of the Montgomery bus boycott, Martin Luther King was a pastor here in Montgomery. He preached here at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. It was through his work in Montgomery that his ideas on passive resistance began to be put into practice. He was inspired by the things Gandhi had achieved and the ideas Thoreau had written on. Martin Luther King was arrested several times throughout his life for acts of civil disobedience. For him, passive resistance was a moral duty.
One of Martin Luther King's most famous works is a letter he wrote from jail following one of his several arrests. It is aptly titled, Letter from a Birmingham Jail. As we listen to a few quotes from this letter, take note of the connections to Thoreau's resistance to civil government.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It is a historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. One who breaks an unjust law must do so openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty.